Hello and welcome to Boilermaker Lounge Tuesday edition here on the Lounge Sports Network, simulcast on ASAP Network. I am Sam Sprunger, joined by Grant Flora. Grant, how are we today?
Doing pretty good. At the time that we're recording this, it's pretty wet and not really stormy anymore, but it was a little stormy this morning. So weather's not the greatest, but you know what? It's late May, so I guess you would think the weather would be good by now, but that's
it's
just
springtime.
Indiana for you.
Get rain randomly. That happens.
Yeah. So
we haven't gotten the rain yet. We're usually a couple 3 hours behind what Indiana gets if it goes straight east. So
gotcha.
If we're getting rain, it'll be down the road.
Yeah. We are gearing up for NAI Track and Field Nationals here at Indiana Wesleyan. We host that, so that's pretty fun. That'll take place.
So you're busy
Wednesday through Friday. A little bit. We're trying to help set some things up, but actually we have a lot of free time because it's May term, so there's classes going on, but a lot of us don't do that, so that's nice.
Yeah. You gotta have a summer of some sorts, right?
Yeah. So we've had a lot of free time.
Yeah, well, we're in the throes of the off season, the May off season for college basketball. There is, some stuff that has come about, like not any big, huge breaking news, which is why we pare this down to a two-show a week, or 2 shows a week during the off season, because there just isn't a ton. But there are some topics that we've got. We've got some player news, some Matt Painter comments about some things, and a little bit of other stuff. But I'm going to kick this off with the NBA Combine. Grant, you and I talked about it a little bit before we started recording, that there were the Big Ten players that are in the NBA draft, and they were at the Combine now in the NBA draft talk and stuff. They were asked what arena they would like to not go, or they're happy not to have to go back to, and multiples said Mackey Arena, and we've talked about it before. We're not making this up. Mackey is a hard place to go.
Yeah, I heard a stat, last 4 seasons, Purdue, I think, is 60-5 in Mackey Arena, at least in Big Ten play, if not overall.
I think
they haven't had
overall.
They haven't lost any non-conference games at Mackey. So, point being, they've only lost 5 games. You think about that, like pretty much everybody that plays in Mackey when they come in the Big Ten, they lose. Like only a few teams can get a win there, and even if they win, probably 2 years ago they lost there. So, nobody has great experiences when they go to Mackey, and whenever you lose, it always just really makes things hard. Plus the fact that Purdue's fans make life difficult for you. Purdue is a good basketball team. Makes perfect sense why most of those players would say Mackey. I think a lot of people were surprised, actually, that there were guys still saying other places outside of Mackey, but Mackey was by far the most popular pick.
Well, Dylan Harper even said, well, I didn't get a chance to play at Assembly Hall because I was sick. But he said that seemed pretty bad, but Purdue's the worst. Like, I don't want to go back. I'm glad I don't have to go to Mackey because they got dismantled. Like 2 NBA top picks, probably in the top 5, went in there and Purdue dismantled them. Now, that's not Rutgers struggled a good portion of the season, and I think it has to do with the fact that you had these 2 top talents that were probably jockeying for control. Not that they hated each other, they just wanted to control the flow because of what they have. And so I think that was why Steve Peichel and the Scarlet Knights struggled the way they did. But to have 2 top NBA talents go in there, and we don't want to go back to Mackey because it's just horrible. And I'm close friends with the voice of the Michigan State women's basketball team, but Dalton Shetler, but he had worked previously before 3 years ago and the previous 6 years prior to that with the Michigan State men's basketball team. And multiple times he'd look at me and say, we have to go to Mackey, and this is going to be a train wreck. Because he said Tom Izzo and all of the players who had been there before hated going there because it is so disruptive. It is just, it gets so loud that you're sitting there trying to have a conversation, and guide these players, and you've basically got to do it just on the dry erase board, because it's so loud at times that you can't get a hold of anybody on the court while that crowd is going ape.
I think the quickest two players or the two players who talked about Mackey the quickest, Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden, who obviously had a very painful experience there.
Yes.
Now, granted, they did go 2-1 against Purdue last season overall, but when they went to Mackey, they got absolutely obliterated. Purdue at least competed with Michigan the last two games when they lost. Going to Mackey was really rough for Michigan, and
Yeah.
they were not messing around when they started talking about Purdue as being a tough place to play. I think especially if you're a team that's comprised of a lot of transfers, guys who haven't experienced the Mackey Arena before or those Big Ten arenas very often, to go into a place like Mackey just is life changing if you're going to be honest there.
I'd be interested to ask Trey Donaldson his thoughts, because
Right.
he's the one that had the infamous statement of, I've played in the SEC in Rupp Arena and some bigger SEC places, and it's just another arena. And then when he went in there, he had a day that was, if you compared the home and home, Trey Donaldson played wonderfully at Chrysler Arena. It was a train wreck when he went into Mackey, and he had made those comments prior to. He walked into it, had a train wreck of a game. I'd be interested to see which Big Ten arena which arena would you like to not come back to ever again. I would bet $10, or that's big money to me, because I don't like losing my money, but I would bet money that he would say, yeah, I don't want to go back to Mackey Arena ever again, because it was an awful showing for him.
He might not say that only because he doesn't want to go back on what he said, but I think in his heart, that's what he would feel.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Let's say it this way. I would bet money that his real answer would be Mackey Arena. Let's say it that way. Because, I think you're right. He made that comment, and so he wouldn't want to backtrack it and say, but he'd say, oh, Rupp Arena. But deep inside, you're seeing the wheels churn saying, yeah, it's Mackey. I don't want to go back there.
Yeah. And that's what makes Mackey unique too. You go back and you said you're talking about like Rupp and some of those other big time arenas, but Mackey's really unique in the sense that it's not huge, which really allows the acoustics to get really loud and be really disruptive, like you said. Similar to Cameron Indoor. Cameron obviously is a lot smaller even than Mackey, but even though they don't hold the mega thousands of people, the noise becomes so much more impactful, and it makes it really difficult for teams, and it kind of helps that culture and that fan involvement as well. The fans are really into the games at Mackey, and I describe it as when you go to Mackey, it feels like everybody in the arena is in the student section. Like everybody does the chants and the stuff, and everybody's cheering like they're in the student section, whereas you go to some of these bigger arenas, you have the student section, which is fun, but then all the other fans are just kind of there. That's not how it is at Mackey, and that's part of what makes it unique and so good. And it's something you can't really get a feel for unless you go to a game there. And it's really a lot of fun if you haven't gone to Mackey before.
Well, and anybody listening, if you have not, I know tickets are extremely hard to get a hold of, but if you can get a hold of them and you have the time, go, because it is an experience like none other that I've experienced anyways. Let's say it that way. It definitely is like you said, it's contagious from the student section. It spreads the rest of the way through the rest, and I'm old, so you'll see old people standing up and doing the same chants. It's an incredible venue, and those that have been there, we're speaking the truth, spitting the truth, Grant. That's what we're doing.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
So Matt Painter was on an interview with Andy Katz the other day, and he had some information and some things that he was talking about. Grant, I'm going to let you kind of cover what he had talked about because you brought this up. I don't want to steal your thunder. So Matt Painter had an interview with Andy Katz. I think it was last week, maybe midweek, maybe, or I think that's when I saw it come out. But what do we got?
I saw it got posted to YouTube like yesterday. I don't know when it was.
Okay, so maybe it was
when it first came
earlier.
out, but it's recent enough. talked about a lot of things. We talked about how Purdue's going to be really good next year. He talked about their additions and what they were trying to do with filling the holes, which is, we've talked about that, and it's basically the same as what we talked about. Talked about some guys that are going to come back and add some depth. Like he said something about Raleigh Burgess. If he gets healthy, he's excited about what he can do. Getting Jacobson back, and Antoine West, he has a lot of really high praise for. So it's good to hear some of those guys that maybe are looking more toward the bench roles, but Painter is addressing them and really has high hopes for them, which is just part of probably selling your team a little bit. But I think it shows. I think it shows that we can have confidence in what they can do too. One thing that stuck out to me though is he did talk about Omar Meyer playing U8 or U19 for Israel this coming summer, and Jacobson as well trying out for USA. I think we've seen Purdue in past years when they have guys that go on to those teams, they really come back and have good seasons. Like Zach Edey, it would have been before his sophomore year, played for Canada on the U19, and there was a noticeable leap from his freshman to his sophomore year. I think he probably made the Canada team because he developed. It's not like having those experience was the difference between having a good season and a bad season.
Full disclosure, 7-4 is a big thing to have on your team,
right?
Team Canada.
So I do think it says a lot of good things about where these players are at.
Sure.
That Jacobson can qualify for these teams, and Meyer as well. Even though Israel's team is probably a little bit less competitive to get on than USA, just because of the size of the USA and the competitive basketball it's always had. But for one thing, it speaks about Jacobson's health, that he can go and try out for this team. He's basically 100% ready to go. And also he's going to be good enough, hopefully, to make that team. And I will be looking forward to watching him play, assuming he makes it.
Well, and Jacobson was on the U18 team prior to going to Purdue, so he has some international basketball, like those contest experience, what is it, FIBA, I think it is, FIBA experience, to where, you know, not saying it's a shoe-in that he makes the U19 team, but it's one of those that, since he kind of knows the process and that style of basketball, which, don't get me wrong, it's still American-style basketball, but it's a little bit tweaked to the international style. That gives him a little bit of an advantage. And you know what? He's a darn good basketball player. That's another thing is you know, it's very specific. You have to be under 19 years old, which is what U19 means. But like or 19 or under, I guess is what it is. So, but you know, he's a darn good basketball player. And so I would not be shocked to see him on that roster going forward, playing for Team USA. As for Omar Meyer, the fact that he makes it, you're absolutely right. There's a smaller pool to pull from when you're talking about the Israeli team. But the fact that he has committed to he's played pro ball over in Europe. He's played, you know, he's committed to a top tier D1 basketball team in the United States for college. That tells you he's going to be something good. He's got the talent. So the fact that if he more than likely will make that U19 team for Israel, you're right, they have a smaller pool, but I think he's going to be one of those that is going to be looked to be probably one of the leaders on that team.
Yeah, I would imagine so. He played for U19 or U18 when they played in their it was the Eurobasket. And he had a really good tournament. I thought he had some good games, I think, against Serbia in like the semifinal or something like that when they went to double overtime. So, but I watched a lot of highlights from him when he played for that Israel team to kind of get a feel for him. And I thought they looked pretty good. So I expect Meyer especially to have a good run with them before coming back to Purdue. And I think there's something about getting on to those international teams that either speaks a lot about where they're at as players, or also will really help them when they come to college to have that more experience and that time to develop before the college season starts.
And Travion Williams plays on his pro team. He plays on, so he can kind of get I would imagine that played a little bit. Him, Carson Edwards that he played against right before he committed, you know, like I'm sure those guys had some input to him, like, hey, if you're thinking of going, plus Sasha was over there making contact. but that just general of, hey, if you're looking for a top-notch develop, like, because on the pro team that I don't, is it I don't even remember who is, Munich Bayern or something like that they play for.
Bayern Munich.
Yeah, Bayern Munich. I said it backwards, but yeah, they play, he doesn't play a lot. He doesn't average because he's a young guy. He's developing, but you know what? He decided he wanted to go to college route. And I'm sure Williams and Edwards both said, hey, if you want to go to a place where you can develop and become one of the top players in your position, Purdue's not a bad place to consider. And then you have Sasha over there talking to him, and I'm sure Matt Painter had plenty of contact with him when they were allowed to talk to him about, and then when he made his official visit, that look, this is where you can come and learn from the best point guard in the country. And I think it was just that pro connection with Williams and Edwards probably played a big part in getting Sasha an avenue to talk to him. Not that he wouldn't have talked to Stefanovic anyways, but the fact that he already knew the Williams and Edwards enough to where, okay, let's see what Purdue's got.
Yeah, and I bet they might have helped vouch for him too. Like Purdue's looking at, hey, this guy looks like he might be a decent basketball player, but is he a guy that we're going to want to recruit? Those are the kind of guys that they have those connections and they can potentially help vouch for you as well. So
sure.
I think knowing that those guys were involved, or at least we don't know, Travion Williams or Edwards were really talking to him a whole lot.
I saw that Edwards did have a conversation with him, but I don't know how much, what it was said in there. And Williams, being his teammate, I'm positive, I mean, without knowing 100%, pretty positive he would have had some sort of conversations.
Yeah, I think it can make like us confident as fans that with those guys as being Purdue connections, that this is a guy that will fit well with Purdue and is a good basketball player that can help them win games. So, I think that was, again, just one of the things Painter talked about in that interview. But it just speaks a lot to where they're at. And I'm looking forward to watching those guys play this summer because it's going to be a long summer of kind of waiting and just preparing for this new season. To have some basketball to watch will be fun. I kind of miss the old Europe trip that the Purdue team a couple years ago took.
Well, they only get to do it every 2 or 3 years, I think it is.
Yeah, like that was really fun because we were hyped up for the next season and had some basketball to watch in the meantime. So having something will just to keep things fresh will be fun. And moving forward, even from that, like Painter talked more in that interview about like the money situation and how players should have gotten more similar stuff to what we've heard in the past, and the sacrifices they're making and basically just how they're looking to go further than the Sweet 16, make a Final Four, compete for a title, win the Big Ten, all those things. So it's just looking like this is the mentality from the top to the bottom all throughout that program is like we sacrificed, we're putting in the work. Now this is the year to reap those benefits and to do something we've never done before and to have potentially the greatest season in Purdue history. So it's going to be.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying it's going to be good. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun to see this team hit the ground running.
Well, and from that interview, I saw Painter's comment was our goals. He started it off exactly the way and it fits perfectly the mentality that we've always been saying: Big Ten title, Final Four, national championship. Those are the goals. Notice he didn't say anywhere in their Big Ten tournament championship. It's not that he doesn't want to win those games. He doesn't hold it to the highest regard. But the Big Ten championship came first, because you've got this team that is so loaded that they're going to be one of the top teams in the country. Should be. Let's say it that way. Barring some really backtracking and some progress and an injury or two, this team should be one of the nation's best teams. But he still holds the Big Ten championship as the number one goal we've got in this season. And I've asked the question to Dustin Schutte, but I haven't seen his response yet. And I'll ask you, with the expectation of Purdue being probably the number one team in the country preseason, and all the expectations from the team, You know, the team making sacrifices to come back, bring everybody back to make this run. Does anything but a national championship make the season a failure? So do they have to win the national championship for it to be a successful year?
I don't think I would call it a failure if they don't win a championship, but I definitely think that there won't be at least a little bit of disappointment or a feeling of falling short if they don't. But I wouldn't go so far as to call it a failure. Like if they make a Final Four again, how can you call that a failure when it'd be their like fourth one in program history? And like they're going to be a good team, but it's one thing to bring guys back and to have the preseason hype. It's another thing to go through the season and do it. We've seen teams like North Carolina. It was a few years ago. They went to the championship game and almost beat Kansas, had a big lead, brought a lot of that team back, including their star players, came back and didn't even make the tournament the next year. Mm-hmm. Right? They didn't make the tournament that next year. They were preseason number one. It was terrible. And
beat Duke in Coach K's last game in the Final Four. You know, they were riding high coming back. Yeah.
So I do not think that will happen to Purdue. I think Purdue's culture, their coaching staff, everything about it is not going to let something like that happen. But it also just goes to show how it's never a guarantee, which is why you always have to make the most of the opportunities you have. Like it's easy. I think it would have been easy for Purdue last year to go into the tournament saying, hey, we're going to have fun, but like we know that next year is going to be our year. Yeah. But you still make the most of those opportunities. They were a 4 seed, but they came out, they got to Sweet 16 and almost knocked off Houston, who ended up going to the national championship game just like Purdue did last year. Or 2 years ago now, I guess. Point being, like, you always make the most of the opportunities when you have them, and you can't ever count on something as being a guarantee for the future. Because who knows, Braden Smith could get hurt in the middle of the season, which would be terrible. But, like, given how much he plays, it could easily happen. Or TKR. Like, anything like that can happen. I think Purdue, we've been fortunate not to deal with those major season-ending injuries to our players in like the middle of the season. Daniel Jacobson being the only one, but he was a freshman at the start of the season, so we could still kind of recover. Like if Braden Smith goes down in February, like this team is going to be hard-pressed to make a championship game or a Final Four just because you have to adjust.
Unless Omer Meyer is lights out.
Yeah, and like it could happen, but still, if it happens that late in the season, like you got to figure it just makes things really difficult. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about where you might not win a championship. It still doesn't mean it's a failure of a season, although there will be some sort of disappointment if it doesn't happen because they've never won one before and they have a team that's capable to do it. So that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah, and I agree. It's not the season's not it's not a failure, and I guess maybe is it only successful if they win the national championship is what I was aiming at on that. But I still say it's no. It's not. If they win the Big Ten, I consider anything else just icing on the cake because I've stated, and I may be in the minority, but I hold a regular season Big Ten championship higher than any short of a national championship. Because the national championship is you put together 6 games that absolutely was enough and you proved you were the best team in the country. But that NCAA tournament is all about matchups sometimes. And, you know, and people saying, oh, well, Matt Painter's lost to all these teams. I care because I'm a fan and I want to see Purdue win. When I hold it into consideration of what is a success, I don't care that he's been beat by a 16 seed in the first round. Don't care. Because you know what? Tobin Anderson and FDU had a perfect game plan that they executed perfectly. They had a game plan to do that and executed it perfectly, and they won. Well, they were a bad matchup because they executed it. You know, when they played Chris Beard in Little Rock a few years prior to that, and they got beat by them in the first round. It was a matchup nightmare for Purdue. I'm not making excuses because it happens to everybody. Duke's had it happen. They've got beat by Mercer as a 2 seed, you know, and you know, there's been whenever there are upsets, it's not necessarily that the higher seed played poorly. It's that their matchup with the team that they were given in a random, I say random, but it's not random, but yet it is random setting of a tournament to where this team's going to play this team. If it's a bad matchup, it just is a bad matchup. Look at Clemson and McNeese this last year. A lot of people were saying, if Clemson can get past them, they might be an Elite Eight team. But don't hold your breath because McNeese is really good. Well, they are, and they matched up very well against McNeese. So I don't consider the NC or against Clemson. I don't consider an early or even an upset loss in the tournament as necessarily the disaster some people hold it as, because it's a lot about matchups. It really is. So a Big Ten regular season championship, I would say this is a successful season with a disappointing end, I think is what I would say.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think too that a Big Ten regular season championship probably is a better indicator of like the season you had compared to March Madness. I would totally say that. Personally, I think if you ask me, would I rather make a Final Four or win a Big Ten regular season championship? For me, I probably weight Final Four as like I would rather take second or third in the Big Ten, but then go to the Final Four than get the Big Ten regular season. Yeah, but I do think if you talk about, okay, was it a good season, and you're looking at what sort of benchmark can you have to show the kind of season you had, Big Ten regular season is a lot better of an indicator because it spans the entirety of the season, basically, as opposed to March Madness, which spans 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, and that's what take Purdue's Final Four opponent from 2 years ago. NC State doesn't even make the tournament if they don't win the ACC tournament. So, like, they considered that season a success because they made it to the Final Four. Purdue added to it because they won the Big Ten regular season. Now, don't get me wrong, they lost in the tournament, but they don't care about that portion. They knew they were going to the dance. They didn't hold that as win or go home. NC State had a different. So that's, to me, NC State got hot at the right time and they matched up well against who they played. And they made it to the Final Four. Purdue won the Big Ten, and I heard people saying Utah State was going to beat them in the second round. And you know what? The matchup, maybe, but at the same point, Purdue was starting to play really hot too. And they got hot at the right time, obviously, and went to the national championship game. But I think I agree. As a fan, I absolutely would take a Final Four national championship happily. But if it doesn't happen, that's before you know what happens. But after the season's over, and if they don't make it, let's say they make it to the Elite Eight and get beat by a team like Purdue against Houston this last season, and the team just plays lights out and they beat them on a last second shot. Disappointing end to a successful season, I think.
Yeah, this is kind of in reference to the whole like, we're trying to win the tournament, but we're not like so focused on winning the Big Ten tournament. I'm going to make a track reference here as we start to wrap this up. But so most people probably aren't super well versed in the track cross country world. Basically, when we train, like our goal is to peak at the end for like our national meet, or the last meet. But we still have been like conference and stuff before that, usually a couple 3 weeks before the nationals take place. When we go into those conference meets, our goal is not to lose those races, but we also know that we're training for nationals, which means we bring back the mileage. We try to peak is basically how we call it for the national meet. We still go out to conference and we put everything we have into those races, but we know we're probably not at our best until we reach nationals. I feel like that's kind of how the Big Ten conference tournament is for a team like Purdue. They're just kind of training through. They're still trying to win those basketball games when they go out there, but ultimately their focus on peaking and being at their best is for NCAA tournament time. Even though they're still trying to win the games in the Big Ten tournament, it's not what they're ultimately building for. And I think that's a good maybe comparison to how they view that tournament.
Yeah.
Don't ever think that they're trying to lose those games, but they're just kind of training through for the NCAA tournament.
Well, and it also gives I truly think, and I think Dustin Schutte even hinted on it when we talked to him about it. That's when Will Berg started getting put into the rotation more regularly. So it's a time for a team to try something. If they have a worry about what's going to happen in March with the NCAA, that conference tournament's an ability to try something in a tournament setting and still be able to know we've got at least one more after if we lose tonight. We'll try to win. We're going to do our best to win. But if we don't, we know that we've got another day coming.
Yeah, it's definitely a chance to develop still and get better as a team in the midst of trying to win as well. If you're a team like Purdue that usually knows where they're going to stand come March, pretty much no matter what. So.
Right. Well, Grant, we've successfully we were wondering if we had enough to talk for the floor of the length of the show, and we exceeded it. We exceeded it.
Yeah, we always do. We always
That's
do.
right. I guess I should just not say let's try to get a certain amount and go from there, because we know we're going to do it. But we have reached the end of Tuesday edition of Boilermaker Lounge. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to coming back in a couple of weeks. We're going to start our Beyond the Rails segments as I go on a vacation overseas. And we'll start those leading off with Walter Jordan, former Boilermaker from Fort Wayne, that played at Fort Wayne Northrop, and then went to Purdue to be a very successful player in West Lafayette. And then following that, I believe we've got Chris Kramer, former Baby Boiler. So we will talk to both of those guys in the Beyond the Rails segments that will take off in June. So we've got a couple of weeks, but they will entertain going forward from there. But thank you so much for joining us today on the Tuesday edition of Boilermaker Lounge. For Grant Flora, I'm Sam Sprunger. We'll see you on Friday.